The crowd was on its feet. The noise inside the arena was deafening, but no one knew they were about to witness a moment that would turn celebration into silence. 12 brutal rounds of punishment had already been fought. 2 fighters stood across from each other, exhausted, damaged, and running on pure will. This wasn't just another fight anymore. This was survival. One fighter kept pushing forward, refusing to step back. The other was slowly fading, hiding the pain behind every punch. And then came the final round, the last 3 minutes that would change everything. A single exchange, one perfectly timed shot, and suddenly the energy in the arena shifted. Fans cheered at first. Then they realized what had just happened. Because sometimes in boxing, victory comes with a price. And sometimes the moment that makes one career rise becomes the moment another fighter has to face a harsh reality. Tonight, we're not just talking about a knockout. We're talking about the emotions after the bell, the controversy before the fight, and the painful truth that only the fighters inside the ring truly understand. And what happened after the stoppage left many fans feeling uneasy. Stay until the end, because the final moments of this story reveal why this fight is being called one of the most emotional endings in recent boxing history. From the opening bell, the pace was relentless. Brandon Figueroa came forward with constant pressure, throwing combinations and targeting the body, trying to slow his opponent down round by round. Across from him stood Nick Ball, a fighter known for his toughness and refusal to back away, matching aggression with aggression. Every round felt close. Punches landed clean on both sides. The crowd could sense the tension building, knowing that the fight could swing either way at any moment. And that uncertainty made every second heavier. As the middle rounds passed, the damage began to show. Both fighters were breathing harder. Movement slowed. But neither man was willing to give ground. This was no longer about technique, it was about heart. And that's when the fight started to change. Figueroa's strategy became clear. He kept investing in body shots, slowly draining energy, forcing exchanges, making every round physically taxing. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was gradual. Quiet. Almost unnoticed. But the effect was building. By the championship rounds, the atmosphere inside the arena felt different. The punches sounded louder. The reactions from the corners became more urgent. Everyone knew the fight was dangerously close on the scorecards. Then came the 12th round. The final round began like the others, both fighters trading, either willing to step back. But fatigue changes everything in boxing. One mistake is all it takes. During an exchange, a left hook landed clean. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Nick Ball went down. He managed to get back to his feet, showing incredible toughness, but something had changed. The composure was gone. The legs weren't steady anymore. And with time still left in the round, the pressure continued. Figueroa stayed calm. No wild punches. No panic. Just controlled aggression. He sensed the moment and moved in carefully, finishing the exchange until the referee stepped in to stop the fight. The arena erupted, but the celebration felt mixed with concern. Because while one corner celebrated a world title victory, the other corner faced the emotional weight of a brutal ending. This is the side of boxing fans rarely talk about. The silence after the cheers. The exhaustion. The realization of what 12 hard rounds can take from a fighter. After the fight, discussions began immediately. Some talked about how close the fight had been before the stoppage. Others mentioned the tension earlier in the night surrounding hand-wrapping concerns and disagreements between the teams. But in the end, none of it changed the result. The final round decided everything. And for many fans watching, it was a reminder of how thin the line is between glory and heartbreak in boxing. One moment you're defending your title in front of your supporters, and the next, you're forced to accept a painful loss under the brightest lights. Yet what made this night truly emotional wasn't just the knockout. It was the respect shown afterward. The acknowledgement that both fighters had given everything inside that ring. No excuses. Just the reality of the sport. Because boxing doesn't always end with heroes and villains. Sometimes it ends with two exhausted fighters, both changed by what just happened. And as the arena slowly emptied, one thing became clear. This fight would be remembered not only for the final punch, but for the emotion that followed it. The kind of night that reminds fans why boxing is beautiful, and why it can also be heartbreaking at the same time. And the most chilling part? For one fighter, this victory marked a new beginning. For the other, it raised questions about what comes next, and whether moments like this ever truly leave a fighter behind once the lights go out. The celebration inside the ring didn't last long. As the noise slowly faded, reality began to settle in. The cameras focused on the winner, the new champion surrounded by his team, emotions overflowing after 12 exhausting rounds. But just a few steps away, the other corner told a very different story. A fighter sitting quietly on the stool, breathing heavily, eyes unfocused for a moment longer than usual. The kind of silence that only comes after a war. Trainers speaking softly. Eyes pressed against bruised skin. No anger. No excuses. Just exhaustion, physical and emotional. And this is the part fans rarely see. Because when the lights dim and the crowd goes home, fighters are left alone with the result. Every round replays in their minds. Every punch they wish they had avoided. Every moment where the fight could have turned the other way. For some, a loss is temporary. For others, it becomes a turning point. That night felt like one of those turning points. As interviews began backstage, the tone shifted. What had looked like a clear celebration on television suddenly felt heavier in person. People started talking about how close the fight really was before the final round. Some believed it could have gone either way on the scorecards. Others said the pressure and body work slowly changed everything long before the knockout happened. And that's what made the ending so painful. Because it wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow build, round after round of damage, fatigue, and pressure finally catching up in the last moments. The kind of ending where you realize the result was being written long before the final punch landed. Hours later, long after the arena emptied, conversations continued online. Fans debated the stoppage. Some praised the composure shown in the final round. Others focused on how brutal the ending looked. But almost everyone agreed on one thing: it was hard to watch. Not because of controversy, but because of how human it felt. Boxing has always lived between glory and sacrifice. For every champion celebrating, there's another fighter wondering how to rebuild. And that night, the emotional weight of the sport was impossible to ignore. Back in the locker room, the mood was quiet. The adrenaline was gone now. Only soreness remained. Fighters often say the real pain begins after the fight ends, when the body cools down and the reality of what just happened finally sinks in. And sometimes, that moment lasts longer than the fight itself. For the winner, this was proof. Proof that critics were wrong. Proof that patience and discipline still matter at the highest level. A career revived in the final seconds of a fight that could have slipped away. But for the other side, questions started to appear. What comes next after a loss like that? Do you return stronger? Or does a moment like this stay with you every time you step back into the ring? No one knows the answer immediately. That's why this ending felt different. There was no dramatic shouting, no controversy stealing the spotlight. Just respect. Two fighters who understood exactly what the other had gone through. A nod across the ring that said more than words ever could. And maybe that's why fans kept talking about this fight long after it ended. Because the final round wasn't just about winning a title. It was about endurance. About how thin the line really is between triumph and heartbreak. One exchange decided everything, but the emotional impact stretched far beyond those final seconds. As the night came to an end, the arena lights turned off one by one. The ring that had just witnessed war stood empty again. No cheers. No cameras. Just silence. And that silence is where the real ending lives. A reminder that boxing doesn't end when the referee waves it off. It ends later, when fighters return home, when bruises begin to heal, and when they finally sit alone with their thoughts, replaying the moment that changed everything. For one fighter, that last round became the start of a new chapter. For the other, it became a memory that will never fully fade. Because in boxing, the most painful moments aren't always the punches you feel in the ring. Sometimes they're the ones you remember long after the fight is over. As the days turned into weeks, the fight refused to fade from conversation. Analysts broke down every round, fans argued over who was ahead before the stoppage, and slow-motion replays kept bringing everyone back to that final moment. But away from the noise, both fighters were dealing with something far more personal: the aftermath. Because fights like this don't really end when the bell rings. For the winner, life suddenly moved faster. Interviews, headlines, new expectations. The victory was being called a comeback, proof that patience and discipline could still overcome pressure and doubt. But behind every celebration was the understanding that the next fight would be even harder. Now everyone wanted to test the new champion. Now there was pressure to prove it wasn't just one perfect night. And pressure can be as exhausting as the fight itself. Training resumed sooner than expected. Champions don't get long breaks. The body might still ache, but momentum in boxing is everything. Each session in the gym became a reminder that staying on top is often harder than climbing there in the first place. On the other side, recovery looked very different. Loss forces reflection. Fighters replay moments endlessly. The exchanges they could have avoided, the punches they didn't see coming, the seconds that changed everything. A final round stoppage leaves questions that don't disappear easily. Was it fatigue? Timing? One mistake? Or simply the other man having the perfect moment? There are no easy answers. What made this ending especially emotional was how close the fight had been. Many believed it was still within reach. That makes the result heavier. Because when victory feels close enough to touch, losing it at the last moment cuts deeper than a one-sided defeat ever could. Fans moved on quickly, as they always do. New fights were announced. New stories replaced old ones. But fighters don't move on that fast. Healing takes time, not just physically, but mentally. Confidence has to be rebuilt slowly, round by round in sparring, session by session in training. And that's the side of boxing people rarely see. The loneliness after a big fight. No crowd. No lights. Just early mornings in the gym, trying to rediscover rhythm and belief. Every fighter faces that moment eventually, the moment where they ask themselves whether they still want to go through it all again. Yet this is also where boxing becomes beautiful in a strange way. Because defeat doesn't always end a career. Sometimes it reshapes it. Some fighters return stronger, more patient, more aware of their limits. Others struggle to erase the memory of a painful ending. The difference often comes down to what happens in those quiet months after the spotlight disappears. Meanwhile, the fight itself slowly transformed into something bigger than just a result. Fans began calling it one of those nights that showed the true nature of the sport: courage mixed with risk, glory mixed with sacrifice. The final round became a symbol of how quickly everything can change. One exchange, one opening, 1 second too late, and everything shifts. As time passed, both fighters carried the night differently. One carried the belt, the recognition, the validation. The other carried the lesson, harsh, unforgettable, but powerful. And in boxing history, both roles matter. Every legendary victory is tied to a painful defeat on the other side. That's why the ending still feels heavy. Because when people remember that fight years from now, they won't only remember the knockout. They'll remember the tension leading up to it. The exhaustion on both faces. The feeling that neither man wanted to give in, even when their bodies were already at the limit. The final round didn't just decide a champion. It revealed how fragile success really is. And maybe that's the most emotional part of all. Fighters step into the ring knowing exactly what's at stake. They understand that one night can change everything: reputation, confidence, future opportunities. Still, they walk forward when the bell rings. That courage is what keeps fans watching. Long after the arena emptied, long after the headlines faded, the memory of that night remained. Not as a tragedy, not as a controversy, but as a reminder of the cost of competition at the highest level. Because in the end, boxing isn't only about who wins. It's about what both fighters leave behind in the ring. The sweat, the pain, the effort that no statistic can measure. And as the story finally comes to a close, one image remains stronger than all the others. Two fighters standing under bright lights at the end of 12 rounds, both exhausted, both changed, both knowing that moments like this define careers forever. The cheers eventually stopped. The lights went out. The ring was taken apart. But for those who witnessed that final round, the feeling never truly disappeared. Because some fights don't end when the referee waves his hands. Some fights stay with you, quiet, heavy, unforgettable, long after the night is over.